Remember the multiple massive protests that occurred all across Canada last year in favor of parental rights? It almost didn't matter what city you were in. If a protest was organized, thousands of people showed up in order to stand up for parental rights, despite the fact that the legacy media and left wing activist groups were trying to smear all the participants as somehow being fringe, radical, or even bigoted. It proved the strength of the parental rights movement that people were willing to wade through all the slings and arrows in order to stand up for something that they believed in. And now that Alberta Premier Danielle Smith is proposing new legislation to protect parental rights as well as ban certain medical interventions for minors underneath a certain age, it's now the left's turn to prove that there are people out there who support their agenda through protest. And so far, it's been an abysmal failure for them. Yes, they tried to mount some moderately big protests in places like Calgary, Red Deer, and Edmonton, but these were pretty triflingly small. A few hundred people show up to downtown Calgary, and this is with unions, different activist groups agitating to get as many people there as possible. It really wasn't that many, and now their most embarrassing failure yet is their attempt of having students walk out of school in protest of the new legislation because it's supposedly transphobic or targeting vulnerable kids. Those are all lies. It's just the left trying to smear conservative policy because they can't actually make good arguments against it. It's really the conservatives protecting both parental rights as well as vulnerable children. Anyways, there's this one guy on X, and he did a great job of documenting just how terrible these walkouts were. Dan Phillip on X, I'd go follow him, the Invisible Dan. I will link his first tweet in this thread in the description below, so you can go look at it, go give him a like and retweet. He said, proponents of Alberta school walkout are claiming it was a huge success. Was it? Let's take a look. He said, Cochrane High School, enrollment 1,025 students. Danielle Smith student turnout was 15. That's about 1.5% of the student population. It continues on. He says, note, I'm not cherry picking schools with low turnouts. These are the ones that walkout promoters chose to highlight themselves. Also note that I'm blocking out the face of the students, even though activists who are supposedly fighting for the kids' safety didn't bother. And he said on Manachaben Middle School, if I pronounce that wrong, I'm sorry, enrollment 540 students, Danielle Smith student turnout 17. It's 3.1%. I may be counting a teacher in there as well. Oh well. And then he moves on. Sorry, that's not quite it. And he said, Leduc Composite High School, enrollment 1,200 students, Danielle Smith student turnout 16 visible in the photo. Let's be generous and give them an extra 1.5 times the students who might be hiding in the background. So 24, 2%. Activists are claiming 40, which would still only be 3.3%. And then the Western Canada High School, enrollment 2,207 students, Danielle Smith student turnout 28 visible. We'll be generous and round up to 40 to account for hidden students and any stragglers off to the left. 1.8%. An abysmal failure. And I think Dan Phillips put a really good point on it at the end of his thread saying, what have we learned? Despite the media hype, turnout for the Alberta student walkout was very low, even among supposedly woke Gen Z and Alpha individuals. Journalists report what they want to be true. Albertans support Danielle Smith's balanced, reasonable approach. Stay strong, Premier. Absolutely. Thank you for that, Fred, Dan. I do recommend everyone who does have an X account go and follow him. That was very good. I'm not sure if he's a journalist, but that was very good journalism that he did, despite not maybe even being a journalist himself. It demonstrates there's not a lot of good people in the legacy media, considering that they made it out that this was a big strike against Danielle Smith. And you could say, well, 40 students showing up is pretty good because most students are pretty apathetic about issues. I guarantee there are teachers, there are activist groups who were trying to get as many students out as humanly possible. If you can only 15 students out, 40 students, even if it was 80 students, that's pathetic. There were pro-parental rights student walkouts that happened in different cities in Canada, and you would get hundreds of students out. You'd almost get the entire classroom to clear to come out in support of not having certain gender theory type topics being taught in the classroom. What went on here in these schools is it really demonstrated, at least in my mind, that the younger generation is not nearly as woke and left-wing as the left would like to think. It actually is, in my mind, that the younger generation is becoming more socially conservative because when they grow up with ridiculous woke curriculums in the classroom, Some of them will embrace it and become radicals. More of them will just become so sick of it that they become apathetic to politics or become conservatives. I actually think that we're about to hit a very young, new conservative generation, and that we will be able to capitalize on that to push back against woke policies, that these students will demand from more conservative professors. Post-secondary, they will demand that their parents step up and actually push back on this crap in the classroom, because it is garbage. We're not teaching kids good things in school anymore, and kids are not going to be led around by the nose by activists saying that you're being attacked, you're a vulnerable kid, and you're being discriminated against. I guarantee there's a lot of kids who would have fit inside the categories that these activist groups were supposedly standing up for who didn't bother showing up, because guess what? Who cares? Danielle Smith's policy is perfectly reasonable. Pierre Poilievre, the federal conservative leader's position on wanting no puberty blockers for minors, is perfectly reasonable. The only people who stand against this are so left-wing and culturally Marxist in their views that they do not think with the rational brain that a normal parent does. Parents do not like their kids being put into vulnerable positions, being made anxious about their gender. And so I think a lot of kids also have grown up with the idea that I don't really want an activist telling me that I'm allowed to identify as an opposite gender if I so choose. Yes, I guess I can, but it's a little creepy that these people want me to search my soul out to see if I'm not actually secretly a different thing than I really am. Very odd, and I'm happy that this student walkout just fell on its face. There's probably more students that walked out. There's probably more students who walked out of the school between classes than actually joined that protest just to go to like a 7-Eleven, get a Slurpee. Hilarious. Anyways, just to quickly mention that I, Wyatt Claypool, am running for the Calgary Signal Hill Conservative Party nomination. It's this riding right here. If you live there, check out my website, wyattclaypool.com, and buy a conservative membership. We want conservatives representing conservative ridings, and I am easily the most conservative person running for this nomination. And also, I have my legal defense fund linked in the description of this video as well. It's a Give, Send, Go fundraiser, because we're being sued by a rich developer who thinks that we defamed him in some way. It's utter nonsense. Even when he was supposed to file evidence that we defamed him, he couldn't file anything. It was like his LinkedIn profile, his company website, and then the article we wrote about him was his evidence. It was basically nothing. He still hasn't proved we said anything defamatory. He's just saying, well, you repeated it a lot, and I feel like it's defamatory. His questioning did not go well, to put it lightly. Mine went very well because they couldn't actually hit me with any factual errors that we made. But sweet victory. It has cost me $25,000, so if you want to contribute, it does help me out a lot. But other than that, I will see you guys in my next video or next live stream, whichever one comes first. And I do appreciate all of your support and help distributing these videos. Just like the video, subscribe, share it on X, Facebook. It gets more viewers to the channel and helps us grow. So if you do that, I thank you. If you don't, I understand, but I still hate you a little bit. Just kidding. Have a great